Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the ICEAA Southern California Chapter Spring Webinar. We've got a great little presentation for you today. So we're going to start off with Danny Politi, who's our Region 7 Region Director. Danny?
Oops, let's see here, turn on my camera. There we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Very happy to have you all here. Just getting my notes here in order. Give me one moment, please. Great. So very happy everyone can join us today. We have a lot of stuff planned for us. My name is Danny Politi. I'm the Region 7 Director for ICEAA. And I'd like to take just a minute to introduce a few of our key people in our Southern California chapter area. Of course, there's a lot of people who participate in bringing meetings like this and other things together, but I wanted to take a special moment to simply introduce you to our main list of characters. And so thank you very much. So I'm just going to go from left to right. And we have Karen, who is our president. David is our vice president. We have Melissa, our treasurer. Nicole is our secretary. Over there on the right, that's me, Danny Politi. On the left, we have Hank and Dr. Lisa, Dr. Darren. We have Justin, Mike, and Steve. Those are our directors at large. I also just wanted to mention on this page here, the folks we're going to be hearing the most from today would be folks like over on the left, Karen and Hank, and then over on the right, myself and Steve. In addition to these folks, very good, we also have our chapter volunteers. We have Dara, Tom, Kurt, Rich, and Matthew. And I wanted to mention that we are really very lucky to have such a nice, talented, and committed group of folks that help us put together activities like this. We really ought to be very grateful to have such nice folks available and helping to organize events like today's event. So let's see. With that said, we're going to go to, very good, our trivia question for the day. So don't shout it out, but the question is, what does CBOC stand for? So we're going to have some windows that pop up for you. I think there's going to be an automated way to do it. No one else is going to be able to see your answer. You'll be able to click on it and provide your entry for that trivia question.
Danny, may I interrupt you for just a sec? So if everyone would direct message ICEAA, that way nobody else will see your answer. So if you go click on ICEAA in your participant list and go to more, you should be able, or click on us. There we go. Well, we already got our winner, so I think everybody did a good job. Sorry, go ahead, Danny.
Very good. We will have a prize at the end of the presentation, and Hank will make that presentation for us. Okay, so I think without further ado, we should jump right in. And I think Karen is going to talk about our current events. So I'm going to pass on to Karen.
Actually, Hank will be talking about this slide.
I'm sorry.
Hank, take it away.
Yes, this is Hank. With a very good-sized board and list of volunteers, we've been able to take on some major projects this year. The most recent is to develop a design to cost training course. It'll be for IKEA, and we already have reviewed the outline and forward such to the VP of Professional Development at IKEA, waiting for their response and their critique. But we've gone ahead with it, and we've actually have completed the first draft. So when it's completed, it'll be available to anybody within the organization to present it as they do with all the other courses. And we presented this or created it because of the demand that we receive from our workshops. What would you like to hear more about? The number one candidate was design to cost. So stay tuned.
Thank you very much, Hank. And next up, we have Karen. And Karen's going to be talking to us about things from our past. So, Karen?
Right. So for those of you who have attended our previous webinars, we always tend to ask a couple of questions to engage the audience and participants more. And so early on, we asked, what do you think of when you hear the term ICEAA, or what does ICEAA mean to you? So this is just a review. We are planning on updating this word cloud, especially after the annual workshop. We're going to be asking people during the workshop, what does ICEAA mean to you? And so hopefully we'll have an even bigger word cloud later on this year. All right, the next slide is also something that we talked about before. So these are topics of interest that you mentioned you guys are interested in hearing more about during some of our webinars. And so I'm not going to read this, but it is sort of organized in terms of like cost modeling and analysis, cost estimating tools, some specific topics like software risk. There's programming. Again, on the second side, there's things like MBSE, specific topics. Anything that has an asterisk means that it is covered in CBOC. And so this actually may be a good point to see who has responded to the trivia question about what CBOC is. Megan, you said there was a winner. How many responses did we get, and did everyone get it right?
Well, I think we got the winner before I even explained how to get it across. So that's a big slam dunk to Bryn Turner. Honorable mentions for the next two to get it were Ryan Hess and Kurt Brunner, and then I think everyone else knew the race was won.
Okay, so for those of you who do not know what CBOC means, I think that's on the next slide. If you go to that, it doesn't say it here. It's the cost estimating body of knowledge. And so we actually hope to have the ICEAA Vice President of Professional Development talk to us about CBOC a little bit, but unfortunately she was not available, and that is Jennifer Kirchhofer. But so she just wanted to briefly say that there are right now two versions of CBOC. The current one is available in PowerPoint and Excel. You can get the whole package, apparently shipped to you on a USB drive, and there's the cost. But we are moving to an online version. We've got a beta version out there that is available to everyone who is an ICEAA member. And then the next slide talks a little bit about what the topics are that you will find in this body of knowledge. And so again, here we have 5 main categories. You see the subcategories. And you'll note at the bottom that Jennifer has a team of people who is updating module 6, which is the basic data analysis principles. And that is going to be including data analytics methods and tools, which I believe includes machine learning and programming languages like R and Python. But don't hold me to that because I'm not entirely positive about that. All right, the next slide talks about another version of CBOC, and this one is focused on software. And the official name of it is now CBOC-S or CBOC-S. So you see there are about 10 or so different modules or lessons listed in there. And there was a preview last year at the annual workshop, and I believe that was to get feedback. And now the release of this set of course or content will be later this year. And it is my understanding that there will be a certification exam that goes along with this, although I'm not sure when that's coming out, but that will be for the future. And we could also ask Jennifer Kirchhofer to give us an update next time. And I believe that's all we have on the CBOC or yes. And we already did this, so I will turn it back to Danny.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Karen, very much for introducing or reminding us about the CBOC. if you're not familiar with our educational offerings here with ICEAA, we have certifications which will not only help you familiarize yourself with cost analysis, but can also help you in terms of career aspirations. So it's certainly well worth your time to learn more about it if you can. So our very next thing, I'm about to introduce Steve, who will introduce our guest speaker for the event today. We are so lucky. We always have wonderful guest speakers. This time is no exception. And we usually have more folks available than we have the ability to put them on. So it's hard to choose between them, but I think you'll be delighted with today's presentation. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand it right over to Steve. Thank you, Steve.
Hey, thank you, Danny. So we do have just a very awesome speaker. I will introduce you to Mark Skoog. Mark recently retired from NASA's Armstrong Flight Research Center as the principal investigator for autonomy. He recently finished leading a collaborative team effort between NASA, the FAA, DoD, and industry to develop certification methods for autonomous vehicles. He graduated from Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo. He has over 41 years of supported work from NASA, Air Force, UAV, with test aircrafts like F-16, B-2, the Global Hawk. Basically, he has taken his Android smartphone, downloaded the world terrain map, plugged it into an F-16 flight control to develop a collision avoidance system for both ground and air. He has recently established the company called Innovative Autonomy. It's a research lab dedicated to the development and advancement of autonomous systems. Please join me in listening to Mark's presentation.
Well, gosh, thank you very much, Steve, for that very nice introduction there. And I want to thank you all for taking the time to be able to listen to what I have to share today. So with no further ado, I'll go ahead and get into it. So today's presentation, as you see, is talking about the business challenge of bringing a safety technology to market. And having worked in the safety world for a long time and with a number of other folks working safety, it is interesting to hear the lament of so many folks in the challenges of bringing safety to market. And the core of the issue is how you track the benefit. Because in a business world, you approach it with dollars and cents. What is the cost benefit? And I'm going to show you a little bit of how that unfolded within the Air Force regarding safety technology that I was involved with for quite a bit of my career. So what are we talking about? We're talking about an issue in aviation called controlled flight into terrain, or CFIT for short. And what CFIT is, it's when a perfectly healthy aircraft basically ends up running into the ground. It's typically categorized as pilot error. So if you hear something in the news, oh, such and such aircraft happened, a mishap happened, and it appears to be pilot error, that tends to be a CFIT accident where the pilot lost track of where they were relative to the ground. They got distracted. Maybe they became unconscious. And when you take a look at the scale of the problem within aviation, it was the #1 cause of fatalities in military aviation, and it is the #2 cause of fatalities in civil aviation. And it's just easy to point to just a whole number of cases. Kobe Bryant is a specific case of CFIT. JFK Jr., you may remember that a few years ago. Steve Fawcett, explorer and adventure, a very proficient pilot. He died from CFIT up in the Sierras. Senator Ted Stevens, a number of years ago, died with a number of other folks up in Alaska in a CFIT accident, even going all the way back to Buddy Holly, and I could continue the list. The list goes on and on and on, because it is the dominating cause of fatalities in aviation. And this was basically, why did it persist for so many years? It was basically because, well, it was pilot error. The pilot made a mistake. Well, time has rolled on and we said, well, wait a minute, can't something be done? And typically what was done, let's train the pilots better. And in truth, there was a lot of data that showed we had trained all that we could, the pilot community, to prevent CFIT. You still get distracted, people still make errors, and it is just it doesn't matter how experienced they are or how trained they are. The percentage of the pilot population that were succumbing to CFIT was evenly distributed across the experience of those pilots. So we said, well, how about if we try something different? And our solution to that was a thing called Automatic Ground Collision Avoidance System, or Auto GCAS for short. What Auto GCAS does is identifies when ground impact is imminent, and then if no corrective action is taken by the pilot, it takes control at the last possible instant to avoid hitting the ground. The way it works to be affordable and be able to make a business case is it has to first identify ground impact. Well, rather than have expensive sensors to go out and scan ahead of it, we take a computer model, so it's just software. We position the aircraft over that computer, terrain model, with the navigation solution. If you think of a GPS is a good example of that. And then we run a simulation of what possibly could the aircraft do to avoid what's ahead of it. We have to do that in what's called faster than real time. And when the last recovery, and we compare that to the terrain, when the last possible recovery solution is about to no longer be viable, it then sends a message to an autopilot. It says, okay, execute this maneuver now, because if you wait any longer, it no longer will keep us away from the last possible solution, will no longer keep us away from the terrain. Now in the F-16, when it issues that command to the autopilot, it actually locks the pilot's controls out, meaning the pilot can do whatever he wants to with the stick and it will not do anything to the aircraft. And that makes it actually the highest level of autonomy in man-rated systems. And there's a little diagram that we have over here showing we can actually plug in aircraft and go through the same process, like Steve said. Terrain, you could avoid weather the same way, missiles, whatever. You bring in basic navigation solutions, you model the aircraft's recovery, you figure out what the threats are, whether they be air traffic or terrain, you compare them to one another, and at the last instant, you issue an evasion command to the autopilot and let the pilot know what's going on. So we began this work, Auto GCAS first began development way back in the mid-'80s. And actually at that point in time, no one was asking us to go out and do a ground collision avoidance system. Instead, we were doing work for the military as part of the Air Force to automate all the attack modes of the F-16. So automatically deliver weapons to the ground, as well as automatically do dogfighting against other aircraft. And what we found when we gave that much control authority to a high performance jet like this, there were cases where the failure could happen and the automatic system could inadvertently maneuver the aircraft towards the ground faster than the pilot could react, and the aircraft could be into the ground and have crashed before the pilot could react. So our only solution to solve that problem was to create an automatic system that would recognize that possibility, and it would take control from the auto attack system and recover the aircraft. And that allowed us to go off and test what we were out there being paid to test, was this automatic attack system. Well, we got done with that in the late 80s and said, hey, the automatic attack systems worked stupendously. They are still the most aggressive automatic attack systems on a man-rated aircraft that have ever been flown. But we all said, this safety system that we put on just to allow us to test has even broader potential. But within the acquisition system of the DoD, nobody was asking for that. So that doesn't trigger the start of funding. So we in the flight test community started trying to advocate that. And that then ensued a 25-year saga before we could finally get around to flying it. Before I go into that saga, and that's going to be the basis of my show, I want to show you what the system does here. So I'm going to show you a case where I'm up on top of a mountaintop filming this F-16 flying towards that mountain. And the system is sitting in the background, letting the pilot fly wherever he wants to, and it's not going to act until the last instant. So here goes this aircraft. You see it, little smoke. It's got smoke winders flying, and he's flying towards a mountain just to the left of where I'm filming. And it is sitting saying, "You're fine, you can still keep going." It's still not acting. It's still not acting. It's only at this point right here, it takes over. At this point, it's already given it back to him, so he can roll upside down, pull over that peak that you see him flying over, and dive back into the ground. So why do we wait till the last instant to do that recovery? So that that pilot can come right back around and do an inverted ridge crossing at only 200 feet above the ground, completely uninhibited. So it's not a nuisance. That was the critical element to making this work, was making sure it didn't get in the pilot's way. So, as I said, there was a 25-year gap between realizing this was a very beneficial technology and before we actually were able to get it out into the field and start saving lives. Let me cover why that happened. There was a lot of early year, first 10 years of just trying to get attention, and a lot of things happened. And eventually that led to senior leadership making this system, mapping this system as part of a 5-year Air Force plan to be implemented on the F-16, A-10, and F-22. However, implementing policy does not turn on funding. There's another part of the Air Force that turns on funding. And what ended up happening was it was an unfunded requirement because still nobody in the field was saying, I've got to have this safety system. Instead, they're warfighters. They're paid to realize they may lose their life in the work that they do. And therefore, they accept that risk and they want better warfighting capability. And in fact, the currency that they're looking for is a better fighting capability. And a safety system just doesn't map to that. But nonetheless, pilots continue to die year after year for the lack of this system. So in about the year 2000, we conducted a series of demonstrations where we brought a number of very high-level leaders into the program and reacquainted them with the system. And out of that, they directed the F-16 and F-22 to basically come back and tell them why they couldn't go out and implement this. Well, that started a little bit of a finger-pointing exercise between the F-16 and F-22 to basically make him do it, make him do it. And the F-16 drew the short straw, and they had to go through and do basically a cost estimate on this technology. And one of the things that Steve asked me to do was add a slide on what is the cost of technology. Well, I'm going to start with it here, and the story isn't going to end here. What came up was, it's like, so another group of folks other than us were said, okay, go out and figure out what it's going to take to put this on the F-16. So the first thing they said is, well, we got all sorts of different F-16s. Every single F-16 has to have this system. There will be no F-16 left behind. And there were a number of older jets that had a different kind of computer, an analog computer rather than a digital computer for the controls of the jet. And to retrofit those, upgrade those jets to digital jets, $250 million. Also, within the digital jets, the processor that they were using, they had taken a shortcut halfway through the F-16 development cycle, and they had switched to a more powerful processor, but to keep the logistics chain more simplified, they decided to give it the same part number because it really didn't matter if you had the better processor or the older processor from an F-16 perspective. And so that meant they only had to track one part. And so the jets got these different processors implemented in them, and they lost track of which jets had which processors. However, one processor was more powerful than the other. And as it turned out, you kind of needed that to do the autopilot portion of the system. So now it's like, well, every jet we have to go in, open up the computer, and those that don't have the right processor, we gotta upgrade those. That's $150 million. Then also, I talked about the computer model of the terrain. Well, the jets don't have that right now. We're going to have a computer for that. That's $120 million. And then we're going to have to do this special test program to make sure it's all going to work. And so that's another $40 million. And so what ended up coming out of this, it's a $500,000 price tag to retrofit the fleet. And leadership says, oh, well, if it's that much, we don't have that kind of money. So that kills it. We aren't doing it. Well, as I said, that was phase one. Phase two of this effort, the Secretary of Defense was involved in, it was very aware of this, that this was going on at the time. And there was basically an email that I happened to be privy to where the SecDef asked, well, okay, they came up with a no, we're not going to go forward. What do we do next? Well, about a year later, or less, about 6 months later, he issued a memo, which was a mishap reduction memo. And when the Secretary of Defense issues a memo, lots of stuff happens, and they have to address that memo. And he was dictating, we have to reduce all fatalities in the DoD by 50%. So they stood up a council called the Defense Safety Oversight Council, or DSOC. And a structure formed underneath that. There was an aviation wing. There was cars, ships, everything. The aviation task force formed underneath the DSOC, and that had 3 working groups. And in December of 2004, I was asked to go brief them on automatic collision avoidance technology, where basically they had come up with statistics saying how many people were dying due to what. And with automatic air and ground collision avoidance, we can save the 2 tall pillars of fatal accidents. And in the safety world, usually when you bring on a new technology, it's going to reduce the fatalities by maybe 3 to 5%. The fact that we're addressing about 80% of the fatal mishaps is just, it's one-stop shopping. So they immediately said, well, gosh, let's go share this up the chain. So we went to the next group, the Aviation Safety Improvement Task Force. Well, General McFadden said, wow, that's awesome. They were just in the process of funding another, I'll say, safety technology through a thing called a program budget directive that basically allows the Department of Defense to pull money from the different services and use it for something other than those services as planned. And as you'd expect, that doesn't make the services very happy, but it gets high priority tasks done. And he said, well, gosh, what could you do what could you demonstrate for $50 to $60 million? And we formed a plan and said, not only can we demonstrate something, we can completely integrate the system onto the F-16 and leave behind a full squadron of aircraft with that capability. And you could evaluate it over time and decide if you want to retrofit the rest of the fleet. So in February, I came back to him and presented it in front of his board. And then he said, well, that's fine, but where am I going to get the money? Which is a little bit of an unexpected twist of events. Apparently, in between his eagerness to fund it and the final meeting of presenting the plan, he had probably been visited by his boss saying, you will not issue program budget directives without letting me know. And so that then ensued. He said, I can't get you the money, but we've got to start to make a case. So what he then said was, let's develop a business case. And a group formed together to do that. That business case ended up looking at the F-22, F-35, F-18, and F-16 and saying it would cost $1 billion to implement this system on all 4 platforms. And the life cycle return on investment will be saving 72 pilots. It'll save more than $7.2 billion in aircraft, as well as you'll have 149 more aircraft, which is roughly 8 squadrons. So you're talking lives, dollars, and capability. And it was only at this point we started to map the business case in separate measures. Not only did we map what the cost was going to be and what the return on that investment was going to be, but the return on investment also branched out to lives and capability. And that's when things started to get a little bit of traction. But within the Air Force system, General McFadden still wanted blessing from his the upper echelon, and then ensued almost a 6-month period of briefing. Almost it seemed like every general in the Air Force. 25 stars in the end. It wasn't until we came to General Chandler, the head of all operations of the Air Force, that when we briefed him, he looked at General McFadden and says, well, why don't you do a program budget directive? That's what they're for. And that ended the chain. Next was to go to Air Combat Command, who set the requirements. These are the war fighters that say, this is what I need to go out and do my job. So that was General Catton's responsibility. When General Catton was briefed, we had this task force that we put together, Collision Avoidance Technology Stewardship Group, that was helping coordinate this whole effort within the Navy. And I also mapped out a further plan as to how we had to communicate things up the chain of command to make sure that everybody was going to be on board within the leadership command to be behind this, so it wouldn't fall on its face like it did 10 years prior in 1995. Even though it was directed from on high, it didn't happen. So Catton said, we need to have a return on investment study, and the programs need to stand behind it. So the first one was going to the F-16, and the F-16 said, well, that's fine. They're telling us to do it, but what about the $500 million price tag that we came up with? Said, well, first up, but this time now the people involved with the technology were involved. So the first thing we said is, do you want to modify the analog jets? And their answer was, well, no, they're all getting phased out. That's not part of the regular Air Force. So the next question was, do you need to have automatic terrain following, which is one of the things eating up processing power in the digital jets? And they said, no, we don't do that mission anymore. Okay, fine. Then the next thing is, do you have a processor that we can plug the GCAS system into? I said, well, we're just in the process of upgrading the jets with this new digital terrain system. And it happens to be the very same system that you guys developed back when you were initially developing this system. We've taken that, and now it's a part of the production. Like, okay, well, that's not there. So the last thing was the flight test part. Can we issue this software update with one of your already planned software updates? Don't make it a special program. Just make it part of a normal software upgrade. And the response was, well, of course, we'd want to do that. Their question back to us, well, what does that mean? What else is left? And in truth, you only had to update the publications with the additional information as to how to use the ground collision avoidance system and how to train with it, which was roughly around $30 million. So the question is, what is the cost of technology? Is it $30 million? Is it $560 million? It all decides on how you decide to approach the system and how you decide to track it. But that wasn't the end of it all. The requirements folks had figured out what they're doing, and they're actually the big dog on the block to decide what's going to go on an aircraft. But there are other folks involved. There's the folks that fund things through the Air Force, and then there's the platform program offices. Well, General Catton was here, so he had decided yes on that, and that means that the funding side was all on board with it. And they said, what we're going to do is we're going to have you guys outside of the normal production cycle finish the reduction work, which is what NASA, working with the Air Force and Lockheed, was participated in. And we'll have the special little Lockheed group that you guys have been working with, which comes out of the Skunk Works and not the normal F-16 group. We'll have you continue to work the technology to have it all ready to slip into a software cycle. Well, what was kind of funny was the program office of the F-16 was kind of unaware of this. And when I came to them saying, hey, we're going to need an F-16 to go do all this on, they said, oh, no, we don't have time for little researchy stuff. Said, well, no, this is a pretty big thing. It's coming from on high. It's like, right. So I said, well, if you're not going to give me a jet, is it better if I go find one of my own? And they said, yeah, sure, go do that. So I went back to Air Combat Command, and they pulled an F-16 from the regular operational fleet, and that's what we used here, much to the chagrin of the platform office. So we spent some time doing this fighter risk reduction project. That once we finished with that, it had to feather into the normal software upgrade cycle. So that happened from 2011 to 2014, and that was the integration program. And then it fielded in starting in late 2014 and extended into 2015. A few years later, the F-35 fielded it. And as a result of that, very first operational save happened only a few weeks after the very first jets, F-16s, began to get it. This happened to be in theater, a night strafing attack on ISIS. ISIS was overrunning a friendly position. An F-16 was trying to basically fend them off. The pilot got a little overly aggressive, task fixated, came flying down, and we measure things in a what we call time available, or meaning an aircraft can get so close to the ground that aerodynamically it can no longer avoid the ground. It's just a matter of time. It doesn't have the maneuverability to avoid hitting the ground, and that's at this 0 second point. So basically about 2.4 seconds prior to that, it was when he first could begin doing his weapons attack. Less than only a second later, he was already getting the conventional warnings that the F-16 has. But he was so fixated on protecting the troops, he didn't hear those at all. And it was basically about 0.7 of a second later, the auto GCAS took over and saved him. Here I'd like to show you a video that's out on the internet. This is the fourth life save. This happens to be a student pilot flying against his instructor. He's doing what's called basic fighter maneuvering, which is dogfighting basically. And this is going to be the very first run. This student's only got 12 hours in the jet at this point. It's his very first training run to do a dogfighting run. So he's pretty nervous. And basically what's going to happen is they're going to pass head to head and then try to start to maneuver behind one another. You're going to see the video from the student's jet. You will hear radio calls from his instructor that's in another jet. So the student is alone in the jet. And I'll try to narrate over the audio here. We'll see how this goes. Okay, this is airspeed here, 500 knots. He's up at 16,000 feet above the ground, 17,000 MSL. He begins to pull G's, and he gets up to over 8 G's, and now he's unconscious. He's making himself unconscious. He's descending upside down. He's at 500 knots.
Fuel recover. Fuel recover.
600 knots.
Fuel recover. Fuel recover.
There the system takes over. Almost 700 knots airspeed. And now he's safe. So I'm not sure if you were able to hear me over that, but basically it was just a matter of split seconds. He began to maneuver behind the jet. He pulled up to over 8 Gs. He lost consciousness due to the Gs and rolled over into a nosedive. He's in full afterburner, so the jet just starts screaming towards the ground, accelerating all the way from 400 knots to almost 700 knots in a matter of only 5 seconds. The system took over there when you heard the tone come on. It pulled him up. He came conscious shortly after that, and it made the difference between life and death right there. And so that's what the technology is all about. And in fact, when you take a look at the history of the F-16 between 1990 and 2019, this is a little bit old now, you can see the loss rate of fatalities in the F-16. And this is one of the test runs we were testing it way back in the 90s. We actually, one of our test pilots was saved by the system. Here is where they fielded it, and basically all the red lines flipped into positive saves. We had one loss, but that was only because the gear were down. He was in a landing configuration where the system gets turned off because of the cost of implementing it in a gear down case is many, many times what, and much more, it would have taken much more time to implement that. And if we would have taken the time and money to do that, it wouldn't have come on till about 2 or 3 years later. We wouldn't have saved them anyway, and we would have lost these 3 or 4 pilots in the process. So it isn't designed to work in the gear down situation, but it's saved up to 11 lives now. In fact, just yesterday, I got word of another pilot. It looks like he had been saved. So that's how the system works. So, so what next? Where are we doing? That's the fighter community. It works great for them, but it doesn't necessarily work for other aircraft. And in fact, the Air Force or the Office of Secretary of Defense asked us to look at other jets, because when we went forward with this safety case of improving, safety in the DoD, it was for all aviation, not just fighters. Well, when we started to look at that, we found that the system that for the F-16 was really best only for fighters, and it didn't work for other aircraft. So NASA took on trying to then expand that technology to apply to all other aircraft. And we looked at both little UAVs. This is about a 10-foot wingspan UAV here, about 50 pounds, general aviation. And we did that over about a 5-year period. And that's where we started to be able to bring the system onto an aircraft like that. We had to port the system to a cell phone. We actually don't have a cell phone in the F-16. That's done in the full F-16 hardware. But we had to then convert it over to a little tiny processor. We said, well, let's show that we can even run this on a cell phone, something that you carry in your pocket. And we then brought that cell phone over into this aircraft where we don't have an autopilot, and then we display a queuing system to alert the pilot where to go and how to avoid the maneuver and when to execute it. Here's an example of the little UAV flying. We have commanded this aircraft to fly into the back of this canyon, and it's being told to fly right into the rocks in the back. The ground collision avoidance system is running in the background, and just like the pilot that was flying towards that peak, the ground collision avoidance system here takes over and avoids hitting that back of that canyon. And here a little bit later, you see right here exactly what it was avoiding. Now you notice there it did a turning run, unlike the F-16 that pulled up and over the peak. Well, this does a turning maneuver as well as an up and over, because low performance aircraft don't have the kind of climb performance that an F-16 has. And we had to start to give it additional capabilities so it could apply to all aircraft. That ones that can't climb as well, it's much easier for them to turn away from the threats. So that led to a larger program by the DoD to start to show how we could apply it to UAVs in a more broad sense. And with that, we started to open up the architecture so it could apply to any kind of aircraft. We brought in a lot of different types of active sensors to show how they could integrate with that. The system could be better. We brought in visual systems. We brought in radars, acoustic systems. We gave the system ears to be able to hear other aircraft. We brought in bigger and better data. We expanded the architecture to be able to handle not only ground collision avoidance, but air collision avoidance as well as any other number of safety systems that you may want. And to judge what to do and when to do it and which one to pay attention to, we installed a moral compass. And this weighs the level of risk of being avoided by each of these and chooses to address the highest risks event first before it then addresses the lower risk events. We also brought in the ability to do handle emergency conditions like a forced landing. And we implemented greater integrity checks on the data to make sure we were acting on good data. And we set up an architecture that would make it very easy to adapt to any vehicle. This isn't limited to just applying to aircraft. It can apply to cars, spaceships, boats, whatever you want. Here's an example of some of the runs. I'll finish up here. What you're going to hear, COVID kept us from being able to fly the system. We had telework, so from this room I'm briefing with, I had a sim set up, and in fact, you're going to hear me talking. I'm playing test pilot, but we're linked over a meeting like this. We were linked over Teams, and you'll hear the other folks monitoring it, what's going on. You'll hear us talking about it. I am simulating flying a Cessna 172, so a typical general aviation aircraft. I've got it way up in the high Sierras. I'm up at almost 10,000 feet, so I'm up at the ceiling of this aircraft, so it doesn't have the ability to climb anymore. In fact, you'll hear me say it is climbing as much. I've got full throttle. I'm having it climb as much as it possibly can. And right now it's only climbing at 190 feet per minute. So hardly at all. And here you'll kind of see what's going on. I'm flying up this rising valley, and there's going to be a point where it just can't climb any higher. And this is a case that a lot of pilots will get sucked into up in Alaska and die. So here we're simulating one of those.
You can't climb over it, right? You can't.
No,
It's
no,
too high.
I have it max throttle right now. This is as much as it'll climb.
Oh man.
And the valley floor is rising. It's rising faster than we're climbing. Look at our altitudes at 300.
Right over here is
50
altitude above the
ATL,
ground,
that's
right here.
70
If you see where
ATL.
my mouse pointer is.
280. Okay, we got over a little bit of a. Yeah, here's where it's. There we go.
Now notice as it begins to turn, it can't climb as well. It's now descending. But the system understands if I execute a turn, I'm gonna descend a bit.
We're gonna make it.
Oh man, it made it.
650, 48, 39.
So 39 feet is how much we cleared the rocks by. And over here is a little bit of a picture showing what it looked like. Here we are over on the right, flying in. Here's where it takes control, and you see immediately as it begins to turn, because no longer are the wings lifting directly up, they're over to the side trying to turn. It no longer can even sustain the altitude it was at, and so it descends in this turn, and it barely misses the rock here. So it's a good example of how the system works. I've got another run here. We brought in the ability to avoid obstacles as well. And if you're not familiar with the Antelope Valley, we have one of the highest density windmill farms on the planet up there in some fairly rugged terrain. So we thought, what a better place to show how we could be safe in the most insane conditions possible. Now, in this case, we're going to also combine it with air traffic. We have a King Air, which is about a 12-passenger prop aircraft that's descending into this valley up ahead, and it's overtaking us. It's flying faster than us. Here we are in yellow. This King Air is overtaking us and descending down onto us. And because it's descending down onto us in a dive to get into this valley, it can't see us. The pilot, it's underneath the nose of the aircraft. So it'd be a very legitimate situation. We're trying to get through this little notch. So is he, shooting for the same low spot, and he's descending to get to an airport on the other side of this ridge line. All this yellow lines that you see here are individual windmills. And unfortunately, we brought the windmill models in, as you see them over here. We brought them in only at about 70% of their real scale. So, but these little wireframe things represent the real size of the real windmills that are out there. And so you'll hear the control room banner, and eventually what's going to happen is the King Air is going to force us to dive because it's coming down on top of us, and it's going to push us down into the windmill farm. And then the system's going to have to react. And it's not going to be able to climb because the King Air is going to be passing overhead initially.
I think I'm going to see if I can set up a...
Should be triggering.
So you hear the control room banner here.
Come on.
There it is. So now it's descending. Check it out.
It's descending.
So it's starting to push over to descend.
Oh, yeah,
So it's just going to get over the top of these windmills, but it's headed right into this wall of windmills.
No, this is a lot more spectacular. Keep an eye on the intruder. This is, he's a little speck.
A little speck, yeah. No, you gotta want to show behind us. Okay, so we're about to.
So it can't go up, because if it does, it's going to run into the other aircraft that's passing overhead right now.
Yeah.
Not that we need to.
Well, actually, to be honest with you, I want to.
So now higher priority is coming to the ground collision or the obstacle avoidance system. So it says, okay, I've got to get out of the way. I can't climb because someone's above me. So I'm going to turn to the side. So it avoids the wall of windmills, but now it continues to go away from its original flight path because it's trying to separate from the other air traffic. So it skirts.
It's right over the top of the crazy thing.
It tries to stay as low as it can.
Awesome. 550 feet.
And now at this point, it's gotten far enough away, so now it can start to try to get back on course. But it's having to deal with a lot of winds kind of kicking it around.
And it's going to, GCAS is going to say, don't,
And it's going to have a little bit of trouble getting by this here, so it's going to have to do another avoidance.
I didn't know that. But it's there it is. GCAS engaged contingency mode. Look.
And so there, again, GCAS overrides the system to avoid that. And it says, okay, now let's get back on track. We've avoided that.
Kevin wrote the system.
Oh, it's going to go right, because in this area it wants to go right. This is
it's TFing now.
This will be very difficult for you. Well,
it's in the FPA.
And it doesn't have much performance, this UAV, so it can barely climb at this situation. But it's able to just inch its way over the hills here. And you'll hear the real-time comments of everybody, because we're all experiencing this for the first time. And every one of these runs is different.
Another pretty good one.
This is gonna be. I think this is gonna be pretty cool for the demo because I'm gonna have who's in control here. I'm gonna have the radar display. And the radar display will be superimposed
for the demo.
Well,
we're doing this live. The chances of it doing that are 0.
Chances.
It's gonna do something else. It always does.
But it no matter what it does,
it gets back to this.
It gets back to that.
I'm just saying it's not going to overlay.
So I don't know if you kind of heard the comments there, but basically we ran this dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of times in this area, and it was like the pilot said, it's like a snowflake. Everyone reacts differently. It comes out slightly different, but no matter what it does, it ends up being the same. It eventually gets back on track and the air traffic is passed by because it's going faster, and then it gets back on and it falls in behind. And so this is just to kind of show the challenges of autonomy and being able to react to just almost a near infinite number of possible situations. But do you have a system that's safe enough to be able to react to all the myriad of unpredictable situations that might pop up? Last, I can show you one more run if I've got the time. Here, there's a helicopter sitting, I don't think we can quite see it yet, but it's going to be over here on the left. You'll see it shortly after I start it running. And there happens to be another aircraft getting ready to come down at us at this point. So I'll start it here. You'll see the helicopter where I'm having trouble. Oh, there it is. There's the helicopter. There's when the system spotted it. So it tries to turn away from it because it's headed to the right. It wants to go behind it. So it's trying to separate from it, and actually you can kind of see it going by. But here it's about to run into the canyon wall. So it's like, uh-oh, I've got to have to avoid the ground now. But it's okay because I'm coming around behind the guy. He gets past that. Now the traffic, our King Air is coming down the valley, but we don't see it yet. Our sensors haven't detected it. So it's trying to get back on its track, and right over in here someplace is going to, oh, there it is, right there is the air traffic. So we have to avoid that. That sends us towards the canyon wall. We have to execute another ground collision avoidance run to avoid hitting that. And then there you see the King Air passing by. Once we roll out, we'll see it again. It's right there. He'll push over one more time. You'll see it. There it is coming out. There's the King Air passing by. So a very complex situation. A tight, narrow valley, 2 aircraft go in different directions, and it ducks and weaves around all of them. So anyway, I just kind of conclude with, again, going back to what is the cost of technology? Well, if you want to say, what did it cost to get auto GCAS onto the F-16? Well, it wouldn't have happened if the whole AFTI program wouldn't have happened. No, there's probably $250 million over the course of its life to make that happen. And then it wouldn't have happened if we wouldn't have started to do dedicated testing. And that was actually funded by Sweden. And then there was the cost of the risk reduction program and the other hardware that was brought on the F-16s. But in truth, all of that was happening for a complete other reason, with the exception of the Swedish involvement. But there we got Sweden to pay for it. The US did not have to pay for that. We were sharing the technology, and they basically funded all that test effort. So it's really a challenge. But in the end, what mattered and what brought it to the platform was the fact that it was going to save lives without breaking the bank. So anyway, with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Wow, Mark, that was incredible. Every time I see that video, my hairs just stand up, and I'm just like gripping the stick. Yep. So I do have a question. I'm involved with some of the Artemis 3 planning for the moon. Is there possible to put EVA on some sort of train following lunar flight vehicle? Is that possible?
Absolutely. And in fact, I've heard that the astronaut community, because this actually, so the direct answer to your question is yes. The way that we rewickered the system from the Lockheed F-16 design allows us to apply it to any vehicle. It could be, here you see a quadcopter, but a lunar vehicle is, reaction jets. It's all very directly modeled. We can directly model that sort of thing in the part of the system that has to figure out what are the escape options. So yes, we can. And in fact, the pilot community, astronaut community, was even asking about that. I know a year or so ago, we were so busy finishing this project up, I just kind of handed it over to somebody else. I'm not sure what all came of it, so I'm not sure where they're going with it. But yes, it's absolutely possible.
Yep, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions?
Hey, Mark, this is Karen Maurikas.
Yes.
I think you may have said something about this that I might have missed. When you were talking about the business case for putting this collision avoidance on the F-16s, and there was some, you showed a slide that had like the number of lives saved and the number of aircraft saved. Do you know how that business case analysis was performed, how they came up with those numbers?
Yeah.
Or
oh yes, I was heavily involved with it. So at its top level, what was it was a very interesting approach. We took an epidemiology approach to it, and in fact, we had a flight surgeon on the project that was a specialist in epidemiology, and so basically he said, controlled flight and terrain is like a disease, and we've been trying to inoculate against it with training. We need a new drug to be able to inoculate it has to be a different approach because this drug is not being effective. We need a different drug. And then we went out statistically, and they were able to, grab data that presented an extremely strong case that we weren't making up, because statistics, you can make any case you want, but we were very open about how we went about it and very thorough, and that we were able to show that no, this is about as legitimate a probability of the impact that it's going to have, and in fact, in truth, it's actually exceeding expectations at this stage.
yeah, I thought that one video that you showed of the student when he went unconscious was very powerful, especially when the trainer is telling him, pull up, and the urgency in his voice.
And in fact, to give you a little more, let's see if I can get through this. It ends up being very, very personal, as you can only imagine. David McBride, our center director, actually wanted one of the saves to come and speak at Armstrong, and so that pilot and the trainer were brought to Armstrong, and the trainer shared, it's like, the instructor shared, like, as you hear him say pull up the last time, it's a much more softer pull up, because he said at that point I thought he was dead. I was expecting to see a fireball. And the student himself hadn't really seen the video that much. And I was a little nervous about how he would react. Are you okay with us showing this exceedingly intimate and personal moment in your life? And we showed it to him real briefly in the center director's office, and he started to cry. And so and in fact, I'll say also, I am surprised at how many full bird colonels I have seen brought to tears with the emotion of what they're able to provide their troops, and the fact that they wish they could have had it sooner, because there are, very dear people they worked with that are no longer here. So yeah, very compelling. It's the life-saving part that finally hit the right note of, this is the real currency of a safety technology.
We got another question from the audience, and I'll just go ahead and read it. It's from our coin winner, in fact. It's from Bryn Turner. At what point does the system return operations to the pilot? I can imagine they want to take it back, probably before they should.
No, actually, so that's a very good question, and it actually, in the Swedish phase of the program, just prior to 95, or in the 95 timeframe, is where we realized how important when you give it back to the pilot was. And we give it back as soon as we've cleared the near horizon. So we may be still in a dive and give it back. If there's rising terrain ahead, the nose may be high, but as soon as the flight path has cleared the near hill, the one that's imminent, the imminent collision, it gives it back. Now there might be a higher mountain on the other side, and it may wait a few seconds, like, oh, nope, I got to take over again now. So giving it back to the pilot is very critical, and we do it as absolutely as quickly as we can, and that was very critical to making it an acceptable system to the pilot.
If anybody else has any more questions, this is the time to send them in. Go ahead and use your chat to do so. You can message me directly, ICEAA, or you can just send it to everybody. I gotta say, Mark, personally, I never know what to expect from these webinars, but this was just outstanding. Yeah, it was such a great touch to be able to hear the voices of those young men and sort of picture what they're going through and what they're and the excitement that they had. So that was.
Well, and I'll also add the young pilot in this case. He had to stay airborne for about a half hour after the event because he was trembling so much he couldn't control the aircraft. Because he even said immediately when he woke up, he knew what had happened, and immediately he flashed to, oh my gosh, my parents were about to get a call.
Yeah.
So he was only 22 years old. Oh, my parents were about to get a call. I was never going to see my girlfriend again. And those very, very personal thoughts. It was a real honor to be able to meet him.
That's some awesome. That's heavy duty.
Yeah.
Well, then let's go to the next question that we got. This from Daniel Bowie. How does the system handle a no-wind scenario? For example, the Cessna can't gain altitude and turning around wouldn't clear the ground.
So this is where autonomy gets so tricky because there's a time evolving, unfolding of an event that's going on. And the way it handles it is to figure it out before you get to the no-win point. So in the case of it can't climb anymore, it knows it's not going to be able to climb. It already knows that it can't go right because there's the canyon wall's too close. It can't climb over what's ahead of it. And it's looking at that last maneuver and like, gosh, that one even descends, but it still clears. Now it's just about to go away. So I have to execute it now before it goes away. And that's how it handles that. Another example of that fighter pilots struggle with, the F-16 system. If you think of air shows, one of the places where in an air show that is one of the more thrilling elements is when the fighter aircraft executes what's called a low altitude split S, where it starts inverted and it does this dive towards the ground and it barely clears the ground as it pulls out. Well, the system can prevent that. And what a lot of times happen is the pilot will be going too fast or too slow or whatever, and he's not going to be able to execute the turn quite the way he had planned. And the pilots say, well, it can't solve that because it's a no-win situation. But by the time you're down here pointing at the ground, you don't have any options. It's like, right, but way up here you did. Before you got to the point where you were committed vertically to have to pull through, it goes, whoa, let's roll out and go the other way. And so it doesn't let you pull through into the vertical to where you now are in a no-win situation. Now, the last thing I'll add, I kind of showed at the very end this complex diagram that shows we can bring a whole bunch of different systems in. Now, you have to be able to address the no-win situation. And in that case, we evaluate the risk or the consequence that is being prevented by each of the safety systems, and we address the highest consequence thing. So in other words, if you think of a baby carriage rolls out and your only option is to swerve into a parked car or off the road, and you're going to damage your car. Well, neither one is a good scenario, but one is a much more desirable outcome and has less consequence than the other. And so that's how our evolved system now works through the use of what we call the moral compass.
Excellent. Yeah, it's doing the trolley question every time.
Exactly. Yep, the trolley question. Exactly.
I think we'll take this one last question, then turn it back over to Steve. And this is probably a quick one. What aircraft are next in line for installation?
Well, okay, so the F-16 and F-35 both have it. The F-22 has a slightly lesser system, but it is a GCAS themed system. Next on the list, the A-10 actually has resurrected its head, and they're going to try and implement a warning version of the system. They don't have the autopilot fanciness that a lot of the other fighters have. So that is in the works right now. All of the Army's future UAV and future vertical lift, meaning helicopter programs, are now looking at it, and they are considering implementing it, platform wide there. So there are a couple of new helicopters that are about to come out of the Army, programs that are about to start to bring new helicopters to the Army, and a number of UAV programs. They're looking at possibly implementing it across all of those platforms. So those are probably the next most likely. In the meantime, one of the reasons I've gone off and started to do things on my own is the civil sector needs a little more help to get it into the hands of private pilots. So I've got a proposal into the FAA to finish I'll say, risk reduction part of the technology for being able to have a carry-on system for general aviation. And hopefully we'll start that work here in a couple months. And in about a year and a half, there's a outside chance it can be on the market and ready to go. Because in the general aviation realm, for the F-16s, we're saving about one pilot a year, maybe a little bit better than that, but roughly about one pilot a year. In US general aviation alone, we think there are roughly 100 lives a year that we could save. So that's, we're trying real hard to work that piece.
Okay, thanks again, Mark. Steve, do you want to go with our ceremony here?
Yeah, no, it's just amazing. It's just amazing what Mark has really done there. So, hey, while I'm on the stage, I'm going to present Mark this token of our appreciation. It's a challenge coin that was developed by our Southern California Board of Directors. And it's in appreciation. It has ICEAA on one side, and on the other side, it has an astronaut. It has like a F-18 and the James Webb Space Telescope and a moon capsule. But Mark, I'm going to present this to you as a token of our appreciation. So.
Well, thank you very much. And I will take it.
Yeah.
And thank you very much. I appreciate that.
How do we do that? Virtually, right through the internet.
I just have to reach through my screen.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. To all of you, I really appreciate the time to be able to share this sort of thing. This is something that doesn't get. Well, it's certainly a case where taxpayer dollars hopefully are being put to really good and obvious good use. So it's good to share the word on that, help folks feel better about that sacrifice that they make in paying taxes. And hopefully it'll make our lives all a lot better as we continue to expand it out into the rest of aviation.
Yep. Okay, I don't know. Do we have a wrap up from Danny?
Yep, back to me. So thank you, Steve and Mark, for that very informative presentation on the business challenge of bringing safety technology to market. I personally particularly like the videos. That first video with the F-16s, there's a place near my home where folks meet to fly remote control aircrafts. And for a moment there, I wasn't sure if we were looking at a model or a real one. And of course, that second video just absolutely is breathtaking to see our technology being used to save a life. That's wonderful. I'm looking forward to the day when that technology is installed in all of our cars and maybe save 1,000 lives a year. So thank you for that. That was really wonderful. And now I would like to bring back Megan to tell us a little bit about some of our 2022 ICEAA activities. Megan?
Sure thing. So the soonest thing coming up, the closest to now, goodness gracious. The next event is the next OEM COG meeting. It's going to be Finding the Story in Your Data with Karen Ritchie-Mislick from the Naval Postgraduate School. That's up on April 14th. And you can watch that from your office, your kitchen, or wherever your workplace may be nowadays. You can also look forward to, in the next couple of weeks, I'd say, the second issue, Volume 10, Issue 2 of the Journal of Cost Analysis and Parametrics will be coming out. And then the big event, the one we all been waiting for, Pittsburgh, May 17th through 19th in Pittsburgh. Cannot wait to see you guys there. It will have been 3 years since a lot of us had seen each other. Even it was 2 missed conferences, but it'll be 3 years in time, and we are really looking forward to it. We've got some fantastic presentations. Steve's going to be doing one. I know Karen is, and a bunch of you guys on the call will also be presenting, so you'll get to see your peers and what they're working on there. And then I thought there was one more.
Actually, I had one thing I wanted to add about this slide, actually two. Notice at the top, ICEAA celebrating 10 years. It was established 10 years ago.
That's right.
So I wanted to bring that to your attention. And then also in the bottom right-hand corner, last time we had asked people what they wanted to do next. This was in December. We had or it might have been November. I think it was December. We had a webinar and we asked folks, what else would you like to do? And these were some of the ideas that came up. So I did want to share those with you.
Yeah, fantastic. I think the rest of our slides, yep, we've given our coins. So I'll take the moment on behalf of everybody, unless Danny, you want to do this.
Well, we have not announced our trivia winner.
Oh, goodness gracious. I'm so sorry.
And
so shall I put any mystery in it?
I say jump right in.
Okay, so without further ado, and some of you may have been clued in already, but our winner of the coin today is Bryn Turner.
And Bryn, you will also be receiving one of those ICEAA coins that Steve handed through the computer to Mark, although we can't hand it to you through the computer.
They had special computers.
I am glad to get one. I'm glad I decided to join and share this presentation with other folks, as well as the OEM upcoming meeting.
Awesome.
Very good. All right. Thank you, Megan, for that. And I know we have 1 minute left. I wanted to ask, was there any last minute questions or comments before our big closing? Right, very good. And you can always type in the messages. As a matter of fact, I'm going to mention that again in just a moment. I wanted to thank everybody for the participation today. You know, we are delighted to provide opportunities like this for us to get together, share, and learn from each other. And of course, your participation is really what makes these events valuable and worthwhile. Also, we would appreciate if you could provide some feedback for today's activity, particularly if you have a topic you would like to see presented in some future activity. That would be great. We have our next page here shows us a bunch of contact information. Feel free to write any or all of us with your comments, feedbacks, and suggestions. One last call. Any last minute words? Very good. Then I am going to have a last thank you to everyone. And with that, I am going to officially declare our meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.